Hello, this is Blair Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show.
Time, generally, how we're being taught to see time is something that's linear. And what I mean by that, there's a past, there's a present, there's a future. But it's interesting to note that if, like, for example, before I got into healing, many, many years ago, it's now a couple of decades ago, I used to play in this sport, which is very similar to pool. It's a game called snooker on a bigger table, which is very big in the UK. And there's that sport that we play here. It's a minor sport here in New Zealand, but most people play pool. But I was very good at that sport, and I became the New Zealand junior champion. So I got to go away and play some world junior tournaments. Mm-hmm. And so when I look back on that, right, it is now part of my past, right? I won that 20 years ago, or approximately that. But when I won it, it wasn't in the past, it was in the moment. Okay, so it's this understanding that we do everything in the moment. There's no such thing as the past. We're just using that as a measurement that it happened in a moment before this one. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a very important distinguishment to see that time is a measurement. Because a lot of people generally see time as a part of fabric of reality. And I believe we make it that. It's not that, but we make it that in the way that we perceive and understand time, okay, in this way, okay? Now, what I generally see with my clients is through coming back to those two pathways, how we perceive and process reality, is that we are generally very mind-orientated, which means that we use a pathway of mind and thought, right? We observe, and then we use thought to get our head around what we're observing, right? Now, we often use a thing called mentality, okay? And mentality is part of that pathway, okay? And we'll get into, that will bridge into this next topic about a spiral and a loop, right? And that mentality is when we are observing, experiencing something in that moment, but we use our experience of the past to influence what we see and how we're going to go about it, which means to process it. And the thing with that is we draw or bring our past in to influence the now, when really what we're experiencing in now is usually trying to draw us forward and evolve us forward. But the very thing that then you'll hear people say, oh, I felt like I took one step forward, only take 2 steps back, right? That thing's trying to get us forward. But then when we use the past, that's often the thing that drags us back again, okay? Because we want to experience that thing in the now as something new, something that's going to open doors for us. But if we reach for things in our past and bring them into the now, those doors will close. Okay?
So let me ask then this, okay? Because I was just having this conversation earlier this week. And this is a well-known topic, basically. People who first are starting to get into meditation oftentimes struggle with what we sometimes call monkey mind, right? The mind won't shut up, okay? But yes. What I have found is that, intelligence, as we call it, is a blessing. And it's also, I'm not going to say it's a curse, but it is a detriment when it comes to meditation, because we're trying to do that mental processing. And I always find it really funny in the history of education, where they're doing all this research about how people learn and so forth. I mean, they're observing, but they're not inside somebody's head, so they don't actually know. So they're kind of guessing. But the idea is presented. It's called assimilation, when you take an idea that you've experienced in the past and you bridge it to this new experience or new bit of information that you have, and you're kind of putting it together. But that's the mentality. That's the way of bringing it together instead of letting that go. And that's what I see with
Correct.
people who have great difficulty with the meditation, where it's stuck there.
That's it.
Because they don't get it to stop. They don't get to experience whatever it is.
Thank you for bringing that up, that meditation, because meditation, which is deemed as a practice, seen as a practice, when really what we want to do is we want to get the core element of what makes that work and apply it to our everyday life, so it becomes a lifestyle, not a practice, so to speak, right? But that's a great example, because, as you say, a lot of people that don't reach that meditative state, right? They try meditation. They'll quite often say, hey, there was too much mind chatter, couldn't get there. Or there was things distracting me outside of myself, I couldn't get there. And why that's important to note is because the key principles of being successful meditation, get a meditative state, is to eliminate those two factors that I've just mentioned, which we can apply and be aware of in our moment-to-moment life, right? Is this aspect that there are things always trying to grab and distract our attention, okay? And we've got to be very aware of that, and have a discernment about that, because there's a saying, where attention goes, energy flows, which is implying that wherever our attention goes, our energy goes to that. We feed our energy into it. So if something else is controlling that pathway, it really means that control has power over us, because it's holding our power, our energy. So I always talk about my clients, that discernment of attention, where you place that, right? So, the common aspects of achieving a meditative state is quite often they'll teach people to close your eyes. Well, what's happening there? Your attention can't go anywhere else other than yourself, right? So hence, nothing can distract you with that, right? Now, the second one, and there's only two that really want to take the core aspect of that, which, funnily enough, right, is an expression, right, to get to the heart of the matter. And it's interesting it uses the word heart, because the heart will get you, the mind will try and stop you from that, right? So, which again is connected to this next topic about spiral in a loop, by the way, which you'll find really fascinating. So the second one is, they'll quite often say, focus on the breath.
Yep.
But really, for me, that is to bring your awareness back to you, your self-awareness. Again, this aspect of when your eyes are open, things are pulling out there. We have a lack of self-awareness because we're more focused on all these things happening out here, which means we lose sight of where our energy's going. Okay, and a big aspect about our life and about health, vitality, all of this is an awareness of how we apply our energy, how we apply ourselves. So self-awareness is needed. Okay, and obviously a meditative state enables that. And that meditative state is actually, funnily enough, our natural state, which is a state of being. And this is where I always love we have a joke with my clients, because I go, that's our natural state, but humans have a problem. They don't know how to be, which is, even though it's its natural state, they're called human beings, but they don't know how to be, right? And this is how humanity has become when we are so heavily mind-orientated. We've become human doings.
Right, yeah.
Okay. And in that state, time holds power over us. This idea that it's linear, when really it's not.
Okay, so let me interject then. Okay. So I come at this as one of those people who have always been berated my entire life for not keeping track of time like other people think I should. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what that really means is I get lost in the moment. I, enjoy, honestly, even as a teacher, as a public school teacher, I had to keep track of the time because the bell would ring and they would shift classes. But all of my students, most of the time, when we would be in class, we would get involved in whatever. And it wasn't just me forgetting, it was them forgetting too. And for me, it started out with this discomfort of here's this other person judging me and shaming me because I'm not keeping track of time the way they want me to keep track of time, right? But I'm as
Yeah.
happy as a lark, like whatever is going on, I'm fine. It's not until that person comes in and starts
Yeah.
acting like that that it's such a difficult matter. So my question with that is,
Yeah.
I guess really it's more like I do think it's a tool. And of course you and I agreed to meet at the same time to have the
Yeah.
conversation, right?
That's right. That's right.
The question is kind of like, how do we merge those two, adhering to agreeing that XYZ is happening for time and also getting
Yeah.
lost in the moment?
Yeah, for sure. It's so many things have just come forth to me now while you're talking about that. I'll tell you, let's just title those three things. We'll get into them more. One is relativity, right? Einstein talking about relativity of time. Two, memory. And three, time became something that enslaved us. Okay. So, um, so let's start with relativity of time. As you were talking about, two individuals, yourself and someone else. And Einstein always talked about relativity of time, right? As if you were courting someone, that time just flies by.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're doing something that you dread and you don't want to do, the time it's so slow. Now, for me, that is an example that we have a creative effect on the flow of time, right? That time is not something that is the fabric of reality, right? We're controlled by it. No, we allow it control or we don't.
Yes.
There's a choice, which for me is the empowering aspect of how powerful we are when we come to that understanding. Now, we'll go to, if we believe in the way we've been conditioned with time, right, as linear, is that for me, as I said earlier, time's a measurement. Even distance, it's a measurement, which means it's a translation of what we're perceiving, which was created by the human, okay? At the level of knowing that we were using at that particular time. I'm using the word time there, right? Now, you also notice with time, we use the word time a lot in many aspects of our life, also the word mind, okay? Now, we became enslaved to time because we created the measurement of it, right? Through hourglass, through a clock. And now all of a sudden people, we've got all these things we've got to go and do, right? This world that we live in, right? Get to work. We've got, client sessions at particular times or whatever that might be. That is now, we're always looking at the clock. And what did I say about before? Our attention is how we transfer our energy into making something so. What am I doing? By looking at the time, using my attention. Okay. So again, it's like, it's 10 minutes, I've got to be there. So there's that aspect of enslavement with that we've created this world that has become that. And we don't realize that it was actually something we created to begin with that is now having a detrimental effect on so many people. Again, this information should be really presenting awareness to so many people that time isn't the fabric of reality. We are not crippled by it. It's something we're forging, using our energy for it to have this effect on us.
So, okay, I coming as a creative, I'm going to say this. So, like, did you watch the movie Arrival?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you know how when they put the ink out or whatever it is, the black stuff, and they formulate their image that becomes this language, it doesn't matter how they put it down. Like it just goes down. Okay. So that's sort of how I see creativity. And I feel like, as we're talking now, I feel like this is the reason why I say yes to so many things, because it's like, yes. And then if it doesn't come to fruition, it's okay, because I'm like, well, that seed has already been planted. So it's going to fabric, it's going to create itself somewhere, somehow. I could be involved in it. I could not be involved in it, but there's value in planting the seed.
Yes.
I guess the next question I guess is like, to me, it feels like keeping time on a linear schedule makes it just feels so restrictive, and it feels they think that they're so much more aware, but to me, I feel like they're blocking out so much stuff that people who are very time oriented, this includes my like a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
But by thinking about that in a linear form, your mind can only process so much stuff, right?
Yes.
Even at any given time. So like if you're keeping it linear and trying to keep it structured all the time, where does that inspiration come in? Where does that creativity come in?
Exactly. That pliability to for me, that's growth, right? That pliability. So, it's again, I'm going to bring that other topic into where we are now with the word memory, right? Is because if we are more heart-centered instead of mind-oriented, and centered means balanced, right? It's an aspect of that. And that's very much being in the now. You've already mentioned about, that's how you generally are. And I am. And so this comes into memory, because memory is our holding on to our past, really, when you look at that memory. And what I've come to find is the more I get more present in the now, the more my memory,
hang on, wait, hold on. Hang on just a second. Let me turn off my daughter's headphones just connected. Okay. All right. I don't think it would have recorded that. The more
it's all good.
You memory, what?
Yeah. So in regards to memory, is this aspect of we're embodying or holding things to the up from the past, right? And for me, the more we hold onto the past, the more the less aware we can be in the now, right? To absorb new stuff, right? To as I say, the things are becoming accessible or presented to yourself in the now is actually trying to draw you forward, to evolve you, to ascend you. So the more we carry of our past, the less we're giving ourselves that opportunity to grow, to evolve, to move forward, and to be more aware and pick up on those subtle things that are happening in the now, that are doorways, the open doorways that can take us to so many things, right? For me, possibilities, right? Because when we go back to mentality, that's probability.
Yes.
Not possibility, right? So, but we'll get into that with the loop and the spiral aspect. But with memory, more I get in the now, the more people that are more mind oriented, they look at me and they go, "God, Chris, you got a bad memory. I just told you about that. That you needed to know about that in the next few days." And it's like, well, for me, I explain to them, but my world's about the now. Okay, and so it's got me questioning a lot. What is the need or the importance of memory, right? And for me, it's just we see the importance of that as the human, but that's more mind orientation, which doesn't herald being present, right? Creating a state of being. So for me, this memory aspect, it's been a really interesting thing to look at, right? Because it is about time. And it's about this embodiment of linear time, which I don't embody, right? I'm all about the now, right? Understanding, right? There's that expression, there is only the now. Okay. And seeing that, and this connects in a number of ways, because there are people that like, oh, I look forward to Saturday, the weekend, or I look forward to this day or this holiday. But for me, every day should be that for me. Every day, every moment, we should be grateful for, have gratitude towards. It's not about having a good moment here and there. It's about having every moment, getting your true highest potential out of each and every moment. Or at least your attention and intention should be invested in that way of doing it. So memory's been an interesting topic because I just feel like the more we kind of hold on to the past, the less accessible we are to walking through those open doors of the now.
Well,
So that's been a really interesting thing to look at.
yeah, I kind of like as you're talking, it's reminding me. Of course, the first thing I think of is just something that I've heard recently, which is this idea of trying to create something that you want in your life. And how do you go about it? Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. What you're saying in a sense would make knowing what you want to create, like intentionally creating on some level a little bit difficult if you're only in the now, because
Yep.
you are the things that come into your life that they're not exactly what you want it to be, create essentially their fodder for you to say, you know what, I want something like this, but I want it to be this different this way. Right. So it's contrast.
Yeah.
So I think Abraham Hicks uses the word, what does she say? Well, she just calls it contrast, which works great because I'm, art. I have an art degree. So that's what it is. And in the sense that it's very difficult to see something if there's not enough contrast. So the contrast is presented there in a visual piece for us to be able to see it more clearly. So if you're trying to create a shape that creates a line somewhere, you just add a little bit of contrast, even right next to right at that place, right? So the same thing could be said even of this, in that we get some contrast. Here's this thing. I don't like it. I really hate it. Now I want to make something entirely different. You can't completely ignore the past or the memory or any of that, but it's part of it. So it's almost like that balance between.
It's that aspect that realizing every moment we have, is there's something to learn from it, right? There's a lesson involved. And as you say, it's not about ignoring the past, it's understanding those moments had a purpose and what you learn from it to now move forward. It's not about holding it or embodying it.
Right.
It's realizing that happened. What was that trying to teach me? Which you convert that experience into wisdom, which then allows you to let it go.
Okay. So another thing, another conversation I just had earlier today. I'm in a dream interpretation course, and we're in a group chat, and we're all just talking about stuff. Somebody's asking these questions, and what I see in the group is no different than what I see with a lot of people, is that there's almost like this fear of this idea of past. I've been working with past lives, probably, I don't know, consciously been working with them for 4 years for myself and other people. But there's this sense of fear, or like they lose their power when they have this idea of a past life. Like, I've got this issue that I've struggled so much to let go of, and then it comes up as a past life. Well, through my work, it comes up as a past life for you to do exactly what you talked about, which is to acknowledge it, to understand it, to let it have the energy that it needs, which means let it go. And I don't mean ignore it or anything like that. Just allow it to have its place and go. But yet there's still this fear centered. I think it's just societal and this person's not even in America, so it's not even a Western society. Okay. It's still there. But it is, and I think it was Bashar who articulated this, and this is what I really liked about describing past lives, because a lot of people get very hung up on the story of the past life, almost like they're using it. Using it to say, okay, well, not necessarily that they're using it as an excuse, but in a way they are. It's like, this is what happened to me in a past life. So, it was so dramatic, and this is why I can't let it go. And to me, I've always, every time I see these things, I'm like, oh, like the one of the first ones, it was this light. I was like, oh, that makes sense now. But it wasn't anything that caused me a lot of pain. It was just like this weird thing that I never told anybody. And then it was lit up, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. I don't have to worry about it anymore. So now I'm not going to think I'm weird because I think this way or whatever. But it's like, are we really there? Like, does it even really matter if you're there? You just touched into that and it told you information. You got information, and makes you able to release that energy that's stuck there.
Well, that what you're talking about, that reminds me of a common meme where they show 3 services involved, right? And two of the services are just huge line of people waiting to get a reading, right? And that's past reading or looking into my future, and anything to do with the present, there's no one who cares about that, right? Which, even though everything, the now, as I say, there's only the now, right? So now that connects to, and what you said about fear, that connects to that mind thought pathway and mentality. And what I'll just lastly say about what we're talking about with memory, and then we'll go into this loop and spiral aspect because it's directly connected to this, is that what I see with, if we don't convert that experience into wisdom, which means we don't get to the point of letting it go, right? Is my guide, my sessions, my soul always mentions that the body's an interface, like a computer, right? And that if we just accumulate experience and experience, and that might be after decade after decade after decade, our hard drive of our computer gets full because we're accumulating our experience, not converting it into wisdom. And this is what then becomes these conditions like dementia. Because when we look at people with dementia and cognitive decline, it's not about their memory of the now, it's their past memories many years ago, decades, that they can recall because they've accumulated that stuff, that they've spent so much time, so many years, so many decades of the past forging their choices of the now, not being present, that has led to that condition, which is really, they're a body of accumulation. Okay, and that leads and perceive it, because when we deal with a computer, when it's it's running out of memory, it's running out of hard drive space, what does it do? It starts to work really slow and start to fall apart. Well, that's what happens with the human. That's why this aspect of being present in the now and understanding that every experience we're having at the core of that, right, the heart of the matter, right? This is why we want to go to this heart field pathway to guide us, which is more about being in the present, the importance of the now, is it allows us to see that lesson, the core in that experience, so we can convert it into wisdom, which means then we don't accumulate. Okay? We flow. This is the key word of flow, right? Which we're going to take this now into this loop and spiral scenario, right? Because the way that I look at mentality is as a loop, right? Because if our past influences the choice of the now creates our perceived future, we're going to create more of the past, right? Which means we just go around in a loop, in a cycle, a bit like a Ferris wheel, right? Or a hamster wheel, right? Now, that person probably believes they're moving forward, but they're not. They're still in the same spot. They're stuck. And a lot of people that are in that scenario will say, I feel like every time I take a step forward, I take 2 steps back. Well, that's what's going on. Now, that's a loop. And what that means is that life is about experience, but again, having a greater insight into what that experience means, what it's trying to teach me, so I can then convert it into wisdom, which means to go deeper into it. Now, if that loop's like there, which is on the superficial level of what you see, that loop's not allowing you to go deeper into that experience as you're on that superficial level, which means then that experience doesn't convert to wisdom, which means then we accumulate that, and our past then is what controls and influences us. We're a prisoner to it. We're a prisoner to time, again, coming back to this linear aspect of time. But the spiral, what does that do? It enables the state that for us to begin on the superficial level, but we go inwards, we spiral in, we go deeper and deeper into what we're experiencing, which is more heart-centered, more heart-feel. We feel into it, because what we tend to find is that the two faculties that humans use to really perceive reality is to see and to use a thought process. That's how we've been hardwired to do that. But there's great limitation that comes with that, because what we see, our visible sight, right, 0.0035%. the electromagnetic spectrum of light. It's like if we go by what we see with our eyes, it's like living our experience of life looking through a keyhole, and that's probably over 1% actually if we did that. So, and science, science loves to do this, right? It goes, we're going to give you a statement, we're going to back it up with evidence, right? And that's a scientific fact. You can look it up. So that statement that they would give with that would be to say, we can't believe in what we see. But every human is discerning their life based on what they see. Okay? So that's an issue in itself. Now, thought is bound to this linear time aspect, right? Bound on our past experience that is always coming in and preventing you to open new doors. So hence, there's a limitation applied to it. Now, when we feel into something, we find there's no limitation, there's no boundaries, okay? So it's a great discernment to have, right? To feel into things. In fact, the very things that we really are all looking for, they might be in slightly different avenues or paths, but joy, happiness, peace, love are all really discerned by how something feels. It's how it makes you feel. So if we're going by thought, how are we ever going to feel like we've landed something that makes us feel fulfilled or content? It will never will. That's why people, when they're up there, always are never content with what they have. Hence, they find it hard to have gratitude or gratefulness into what they already have. So, and when we get to that meditative state, what are we doing? We're bypassing the mind and its thoughts, and we're getting to the heart. Okay, that's our natural state. That's where our authenticity is presented when we get into the heart, we open our heart more. So this aspect of, I look at spiral loop is that the loop is when we are mind thought orientated, and mentality is what's processing what we perceive, which is only on that superficial level, which means then we don't convert that experience into wisdom, which means that we're just going by our limited faculties. And a lot of times we're guessing what that really represents or means, which means our energy goes into something that we're guessing. And a lot of times we then create things that are not even there, right? So if we look at it that way, perhaps our biggest block or obstruction in that instance is ourself, okay? Now, when we get into the spiral, instead of the mind, it's heart, right, which is the seat of the soul. And instead of mentality, it's our insight, which is our pineal gland, our third eye. Now, why I call it insight is because we've got two eyes here, which are a duality, and they are our external sight. But this gland here, right, science calls it pineal gland, but the ancient spirituality calls it an eye. It's embedded in the head, so it's not looking that way, it's looking that way. Because our authenticity comes from within, right? Again, meditation, what that? About going within. All these aspects about within. So what this does, again, with the heart, they are our greatest allies. And I always like to give my clients this visualization of a rally driver where the heart's behind the steering wheel, and then they've got the guy in the passenger seat that's directing left, right, because they're driving so quickly. That's the pineal gland, because it's part of our attention. Our attention is this two eyes to see and one eye to know. If we're in mind and mentality, this closes up, and all we've got to go by is the limitation of visible sight, which is to see but not to know. Okay, so there's so many people in our field that are always talking about we need to activate our third eye, we need to open our pineal gland. The greatest way you can do that is, again, to shift from a mind thought pathway into a heart feel one, because the heart feel pathway doesn't use mentality. And the beautiful thing about this, and I know it's a really simplification of it, but for me it's getting to the core of it, is that we've got this sector of health called mental health, this imbalance of mental health and mental illness. Now, mental illness and mental health can only be part of reality if a person uses mentality as part of their process of perceiving and processing.
Okay, so let me ask this then, okay? And I know other people have this question too, because it definitely is pretty loud for me. So we exist all together in different dimensions, meaning, we fluctuate between our frequencies change, right? So we can go up, we can come down. There's other people that we see that are lower, that are higher, it doesn't matter. We interact with them. So we're constantly in this flux of change. So if we are in our heart space and we're perceiving from the heart or experiencing from the heart, and we feel like let's say we're going into the feeling of whatever let's pick just pick a lesson of whatever and say we're going into it, we're getting deeper, we're having greater understanding, we're transmuting that energy into wisdom.
Yeah.
But the idea, I like it because it does happen this way in the sense that, you deal with something on one level, you go deeper. I know this through energy work, right? You go deeper on that and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that about this. Okay, I'm ready to try again. And then it comes up again. It's not exactly the same. And the person experiencing it, if they've done that work, they know it's different. Okay.
Yes.
The people that are not you, that are on the outside and they're watching you and they're still watching you go through experiencing that same kind of situation over and over again, whether they notice that you've changed or not, it does. What I find is conversations, there was one just 20 minutes ago, they asked the conversation, okay, well, here's this thing. Are you getting this new outcome that you wanted from this situation that you've done over and over? And I say, no, I'm not. It's okay because I'm okay with it, right? But
Yes, that's right.
the other person is not, they don't understand that.
Yep.
So how do we take your interactions with other people and not have the other person who's in that mentality kind of bring, it feels like a drag. It feels like I'm not going to say it drags me down, but I think sometimes it does. Like it doesn't do it.
Yeah. Again, it's like, I guess it's an expression that people say, you got to go with your heart.
Yeah.
Right. And again, that discernment of what feels right. And that's going to be, as you say, it's going to be different from individual of their level of knowing, right? Or their place on their path is going to be everyone's going to be a little bit different. And this is why I feel like this world needs to embrace the indifferences from each other, and we actually have to celebrate that. I think there's too much of a drive to try and make everybody the same.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, that's, anybody that reads my social media stuff, I quite often, they probably think, well, Chris doesn't like humanity or humans. No, it's not that. It's more about, I don't like the identity that we were given, because I believe we're more than that. We're a soul, we're a consciousness that kind of gets forgotten about because we embrace so much of this humanity or human aspect. Because for humanity is is a group that you become part of, right? Which is, and for me, that drives us too much into conformity, into we all need to be the same. And I feel like there's so much evidence showing up that to a certain degree that doesn't work. For me, is how we collectively all come together is to celebrate all our indifferences, our differences, and celebrate all our unique gifts, right, and our uniqueness. And I think that's what's required, and I think that's why also there's an identity crisis at the moment in regards to humanity. And I think for me, we're trying to figure that out on a human level, but I feel like what will resolve that is going beyond that to see ourselves as this consciousness, this soul. I think that is trying to forge its unique kind of gift or path, and that needs to be celebrated more. So for me, it's connecting into a way we want to connect with other people as much as possible is heart to heart, right? Because what we do is we kind of bypass that limitation of you're a woman or a man, or you're a human to a human. We just connect soul to soul, and we do that with cats, dogs, any form of life form, and we just connect heart to heart, conscious to consciousness. And if that person is saying it in a different way or seeing it in a different way, but you can see that it makes them happy, well, you know that, hey, that's great, good for you, right? Because that's getting them in their heart, and that's part of their path. It might not be part of my path, but I'm happy for that person that it is part of their path. Because again, that discernment of whether they're on the right track is if they're in love with what they're doing, right? Because that's what's coming from the heart, you know. When you start to see people that are very conflicted about where they're at, and they, you can see they're very lost in their process, which is being up here, then all of a sudden you can see it as that because you're seeing it from the heart. It's a lot of the time the trouble happens when people are interacting with each other and they're both, or a number of people, they're all up here. And that's, I feel like, what we're generally seeing on a collective level happening with humanity at the moment. And that's what then creates what is based as social norms and all these norms that they believe everyone should be like, right? Which again is this conformity aspect.
Right.
So therefore, for people that are wanting to go deeper into something, break new ground, a lot of the times it's ridiculed, right? It's that whole aspect
Yeah.
of
Right.
truth, all the steps truth has to go through. But we also got to understand that science sees truth as there's one truth, there's one absolute, when really for me, it's about the individual finding their truth. That's the key aspect.
What I really like about what I think I'm hearing you say underneath all of that is we can take, if we're in our heart space and somebody comes up to us and they're in their head space or mentality, and there's a misalignment or confusion, we can go into our heart space and essentially honor that and represent it and communicate through our heart. And that will bring the other person kind of to that space. It does.
Yeah.
It does. We're really easily. And that's actually, now that you're saying this, I'm thinking of a good friend of mine she always has a way of approaching people that allows them to do that. And it always, it's not even a deflection. It's like a calming of the energy, the mentality energy is, for me, it's higher. And I don't mean like higher frequency. I mean, like, it feels like it's in the head and it's, jumpy or, okay, anytime I ever see a visual effect that says glitch, all I can think of is no, I don't like, that's what it feels like. It feels like a glitch kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it coming from the heart space when you're communicating with somebody else actually allows people to reset that glitch. It's almost like
correct. Yeah, for sure.
it's the electrical charge and start again.
Yeah, for sure. And as I say, your role is to hold space, because I deal with a lot of people that come to me and they go, hey, I'm on this path of spirituality, right? Learning more about being in the heart and my consciousness. But my husband or my partner is still very mind oriented. How do we, I'm forging a road that's going, on another direction, but how do we still maintain this relationship, this marriage, right? Where we have this connection. And, they're obviously at first wanting to say, come with me. And they're that person doesn't, right? And then they come back and they go, oh, now I feel real low in vibration. He's affected my energy and stuff like that. He's dragged me down to his level. And I said, that's because you're trying to force something. What you need to do is, yes, in any relationship, you've got to realize there's still two individuals involved that need growth individually. And you have to respect that aspect, So when you're dealing in that situation, what you need to do is you're in the heart, you're up in this high vibration, and you just have to hold space for the other person. And it's up to that person whether they want to drop in their heart or not. And you have to respect that decision, either whether they do or don't. And that's a more sustainable way, because what happens is you keep your vibration up. You don't drop to their level. You're giving them the opportunity to drop, not even get to your level. It's because it's about them dropping into their heart. It's about them getting in tune with their energy. It's like in session work with me, I'm not sending them energy. I'm just connecting them into more of their own energy, right? Which is, again, about talking about this unique quality they have, which we call their energy signature, which is the soul, right? And because that's in alignment with them, that works for them. It's not like we're trying to put a square into a circle hole, right? Because that it just doesn't, it's not in alignment with them. It's about connecting them into an energy that aligns with them, that makes them feel more at ease, which is the mean to feel more at peace with who they are, because they know more about themselves, because they're more connected to themselves. So again, it's that aspect of, we're never trying to draw our energy onto them or force our energy onto them. It's about holding space, a remembrance that, hey, I'm in my heart, I'm holding this space. How does it feel? And they're like, oh, this feels good. I fall into my heart. And now all of a sudden, they're in tune with each other, they're in connection with each other, not through giving each other the other's energy, but about holding a space that allows them to drop into their heart, to connect into more of themselves as a unique individual, even though they're in a relationship.
Yeah. Okay. So which of course, they're improving their relationship with themselves, which makes any relationship they're in better. But
that's right.
I want to pull in here because I personally, because I'm dealing with it now, but I think everybody deals with it on a regular basis. And I'm struggling with trying to wrap my head around it, not even coming through a heart space about this, but I'm taking a course that's teaching me more or different ways of channeling. I now know that, yes, I've been channeling for a long, long, long time, and maybe have a name for it or whatever. And there is a lot of talk, and it's not just through the channeling course, it's through all different kinds of places. A lot of energy workers will do this stuff where, they say things about protection and I don't know. I wasn't raised in a very religious, it wasn't anti-religion, but it wasn't super strict religious. So I don't have all those attachments to things like guides, angels. And then, of course, now I realize I'm more of somebody who connects with somebody's energy than I am. So I'm not good with names. I'm not, like the stories that go with it. It doesn't make much. I mean, it makes sense, but it's not the real story. To me, the real story is the energy.
That's how it feels. Correct.
Yeah. But so this idea of protecting one's energy. So when I teach Reiki, this last time I taught it, I actually, we really went into this because people were very concerned in this group about protection. Okay. And how does it work and all of that. And the way I tried to articulate it was exactly what you just said, which is it's not really protection in the sense. Okay. We know that language is limiting, period. Okay. It's not protection, so to speak. It's more of, when you do Reiki, what you're doing is you're raising your vibration, you're going into your heart center, and you're remembering how much love there is and that you have, and then you're amplifying it, right? Yes. And by amplifying that, this other energy that is not love or is not very close to love just doesn't resonate. So it just goes away, and you don't really have to do anything about it. But it is about that going in. And I feel the same about the channeling and the protection and all that. I really had a hard time. We had a class last weekend, and it was like an hour and a half talking about protection. And it was like, there were these words that he was giving us to use. And I understand where it's coming from. I know it has value. Okay. But it says things like, you ask your higher self for something, and then it has all these qualifiers after about, like, if you need help, then go do this and this. And if you, and I'm thinking, your higher self has the power for everything. Like, that's, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And I'm just curious, like, to me, it feels like that kind of stuff comes from a place of fear, which I think might be the mind. It's the stories.
Right. Yeah. What you're talking about right now, that for everybody listening here, this is a great example of Blair and I connecting heart to heart, soul to soul here, because it's kind of lining up with what I was going to talk about next. Okay, so in relevance to Blair mentioning here about protection, because I think a downfall of protection and what Blair's mentioning here is that protection should be an indirect thing that happens, not a direct thing that we focus on. Because as I mentioned before, right, where our attention goes, energy flows. So because protection is this, what underlies the intention, what underlies protection is that is always something we need to run away from. There's something out to get us. So if our intention is feeding energy into that, what do you think more experience is going to become? More things to run away from, more things to fear about. Okay. So that can be a little bit of a problem, is that it becomes a direct focus. So how we just naturally provide protection indirectly is when we focus on bring more of our power through. It's not focusing on the dark, it's not focusing on what we fear, but it's bring about more of ourself, which comes through the heart. Okay, because heart's love, mind's fear. Okay, so one thing I'll mention before we go into, because this is connected with our aura, okay, with also the word atmosphere. Okay, what I will say, and I get a lot of this too, is a lot of clients always saying, "Oh, I think there's somebody spelling me or putting curses on me. I need more protection," this sort of thing. What I will say straight out is that person, whatever's happening, you are allowing it to be part of your field. There is a choice. A lot of people they don't understand this. When you start to fixate, draw, which is part to do with your attention, right? Place your attention on these things that you believe are happening, that are coming outside of you. That's you allowing it in to affect you.
Mm-hmm.
But that's your choice, and that's your energy making that so. That's a very self-empowering thing to know as well, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we never want to, and why I'm completely behind Blair here, that we don't want protection to be a very direct thing. It's an indirect thing that happens naturally when our focus is more on just facilitating, providing more of ourselves, okay? And being in love, being in the heart. So let's take that now to what we're going to talk about here about the aura. Now, there's a chart that I use in my sessions, which is we measure someone's auric field, okay? And quite often we call the aura our field of positive influence, okay? So when we go to our auric field and it shows a really diminished, collapsed field, I'll tell you what I immediately know already. That person is guided through mind, thought, then heart, feel. And because of that, their intention, the way they give their energy, they're giving their energy into things that will only then hold power over them. Again, that aspect of allowing. Mm-hmm. But of course, they're not doing that on purpose. They just don't have a knowing that they actually have a choice of allowing there. Okay. Now, when we then all of a sudden get their heart more open, get them in the heart, then their field just expands out big time. And what that means is anything that then comes into that field, immediately it's flipped into something that works for you. So you can see that as protection. Mm-hmm. Really, our focus isn't protection. It just happens when we just be more aware, present a state of being present, which allows us to fall into the heart, get that heart open. And that's just part of the byproduct of doing that. Okay, so how the word aura and how I connect it to the word atmosphere is, when they talk about a planet, they'll quite often call it a planetary body. Okay, we have a body, right? And when we look at a planet that is thriving in life, right? And obviously Earth, let's take Earth, right? It has life here because it has an atmosphere, because atmosphere protects it from the harshness of space. Mm-hmm. When we look at planets that don't have an atmosphere or hardly it, it's barren, it's got craters everywhere, there's no life. Okay. So when I'm talking about getting in your heart and expanding your aura, you can then see it as this aspect that, because space means it's got many meanings too, right? There's space, right? This cosmos, but us holding space, which we were just talking about, right? In regards to relationships or just dealing with other people. So, when we're more in our heart, we're holding a space of love, right? Which then doesn't allow these things that cause fear to then affect you, because we're creating a space that's not in alignment with fear. We're creating a space that's in alignment with love. And love is an energy that sustains us.
Right.
Fear doesn't. Okay. Fear makes us feel uneasy. Love makes us feel more at ease. And uneasy or unease is also the word dis-ease. Okay. So now where I want to connect that with Corona, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Because the sun, because this is interesting, right? We've been through this whole COVID thing.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID's short for a coronavirus. Okay. And there was a lot of fear around because of COVID, right? And still is.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just talked about, right? Fear is our kryptonite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so with this whole COVID thing, right, and also it connects into this thing that there's something out there out after us, this virus in the air that's coming to get us. It shifts us it shifts us up to here. Yeah. Right? Because our focus, our attention's over here of this thing that's following us. What happens to our field? Collapses in. COVID, Corona, holds power over us. And what happens? Our atmosphere, which the atmosphere of the sun is Corona, diminishes. Right? And the thing is another connection with this. The sun, what is also commonly known as? Soul, S-O-L, but pronounced S-O-U-L. So there's a direct connection with the sun and our light, our soul, that is our energy signature. So what this COVID or coronavirus is doing is more about how it's perceived to be this thing as this virus, this fear aspect that comes with it, that collapses our field. And then we feel vulnerable to it. When really, if we just stay in the heart enough and we keep that out expanded, then it's a completely different game. I'll give you an example of this. And this is something that I guess is now part of the past, but an example of how I reflected on it. I learned something from it and then let it go. Okay. Because when we don't learn the lesson, that's usually when we hold it still. Okay. Again, that aspect of converting experience into wisdom. I make these energy products, right? These tincture products, and I make bracelets, pendants, and all these products. And at that time, I was wearing a couple of bracelets that I made with an energetic that is very expansive. And when I mean very expansive, it facilitates more of my consciousness to be present here, what does that result in? A very expansive auric field. Mm-hmm. Now, when here in New Zealand, at really the height of COVID, and everyone was getting COVID, and what was kind of the thing to do then was when somebody got COVID in the family, then you were in lockdown. You all had to be in the same household until there was a negative test, right? And so my daughter got it initially, and funnily enough, my son and I were at a sporting event locally, but we were out, and then all of a sudden got a text message from my partner saying, my daughter's come down with COVID, positive test. So, and she was like, can you grab a whole lot of stuff at the supermarket because we're then going to be locked for a week or whatever. So all of a sudden she gets it, and then my partner gets it, right, their mother, and then my son gets it, and everyone was like, "Oh, Chris, you're going to get it." That's what happens. You're around them, and you spread it from person to person. I never got it. I never got it, and I didn't feel sick in any way. And I was scratching my head, and it was a learning opportunity. What do I learn from this example, right? This experience. And I realized that actually I was wearing these products that was enabling my field to stay expanded. And how COVID then has power over you, or anything. We don't even used to have to use COVID in this example. Anything is when it gains more of your attention, intention, more of your power, which means then your field collapses in, and then you're vulnerable to it. Very interesting stuff.
I was taking care of my elderly mother. I don't remember when it was. It had been a while. We didn't get it at first. But one of my children we got a notification that said they had been in close proximity with somebody who had tested positive. And I think that one of them did bring it home. Of course, it wasn't too bad for them, and I remember when it transferred, I got it after one of them. Okay. And then I think the other one got it. And I am pretty sure that my mother got it. Now, we didn't test her. Now, she was like 77, diabetic. Yes. She had her share of health conditions. Okay. So she
a lot of
one of those, the ones that they were worried about, right? But my mother's mentality was, I'm not getting that. Meaning, I'm not getting it. For her, the way she spoke was basically because that's the end thing and I'm not going to do it. And so she has a very strong mentality. I mean, she even said that about cancer. She said it about dementia. She never got any of that stuff. But what I noticed is that it did kind of progressively be weaker as it kind of went through. And I don't necessarily think it was the virus. I think it was the people who were, like you're saying, giving it power to acknowledge whatever it is that they're saying about it.
Because it was everywhere, right? It didn't matter. You go turn on TV, it's all about COVID and the numbers and what's happening, and then I'm turning this off. Let's go for a walk, and then people come up to you. Let's have a conversation. Especially when people are able to mingle. What was the first type of conversation? COVID. It was everywhere, right? So which meant it was always part of your attention, your intention, talking about it. Which means then we give it power. And you imagine that's one person. You imagine, a mass, a collective of individual creative power all going into it. No wonder it's something that's kind of, a lot of people are like, it's a monkey on our back. When is it going to go away finally? Well, it goes away when we stop placing our attention and intention on it. Simple as that.
I want to say two things and then we got to end it for this session. But one thing was, as an American, with what happened here in America, I definitely was part of the fear at the beginning because I just didn't know anything about it. It was kind of caught me off guard or whatever. And I dealt with it for a while. And then, and I would listen to what they were putting out on the news. And, you would have contrasting information. You have one person say, oh, it's so terrible, blah, blah, blah. The other person, it's really not that bad, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And so because I wanted to try and stay unbiased, I would listen to the two because they were very clear, very distinct parties, if you will, saying those things. And then eventually I just got so fed up with it. And I was like, you have this contrast. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Neither one of you actually knows. So I'm done. I'm just going to let it go. And then I turned that stuff off. I didn't worry about it anymore. And that was it. And I just want to say that I think that's another example of contrast, right? Whereas if it was just presented one way and with everybody confirmed that, you wouldn't have that contrast. You might have that you didn't want it, but you wouldn't have that contrast between what's the truth, what's not the truth. But for me, that yin yang was just like, that's it. I'm done. And I want to end with a phrase that I heard and I actually heard him say it because I saw the video, but oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Morgan Freeman. I heard him. So he's from Mississippi, which is in our country is it's in the Southeast and it is well known for I would say racism. There's a high contrast of people, a lot of white people, a lot of black people. And so it's known for that. And so he's from there from way back when. I mean, he's not that old, but from way back when there really was a lot of really horrible racism going on. And I heard him say one time, because somebody was asking, when are we going to when are we going to get this monkey off our back, as a culture? And he said, stop, exactly what you said. Stop paying attention to him and stop looking at each other as if there's a problem. It's not, no problem. Stop talking about it because you're making the problem.
Correct. And I feel like, because I know this is really fragile territory for a lot of people because it's quite decisive, but, this wokenism of the world that it's bringing up these things, but with it, more attention placed on it, which then only merely feeds the very thing that they're bringing forth, right? So it's, and then a lot of people will go, oh, but that's you putting your head in the sand. No, it's not. It's more realizing our creative process that a lot of people are unaware of. And this is what I have to talk to clients daily, because a lot of people come to me and they go, hey, I've tried this, I've tried that. And it's all things that they're drawing sustenance out here and bringing in. I said, no. It's nothing to do with bringing things in. It's about how you perceive it. It's using you as the tool.
Yeah.
Have you looked at changing the way you look at it? Because if you change the way you look at something, it changes accordingly.
Yeah.
so and they're like, no. It's common, trust me. And so that brings a lot of joy to me, because for me, when we're always drawing things outside of us, how much empowerment is in that? For me, there isn't.
Yeah.
When all of a sudden you learn more about your creative process and what you provide, that is empowerment. That's walking in your power, right? So it's that instead of this vulnerability aspect, we're more focused on, again, because when we get mind thought, it externalizes everything. So we believe everything's out here. When we get more in the heart, no, it's more a realization of what you're capable. It's more about what you provide, how you apply yourself. So no, I saw that too in regards to Morgan Freeman, and he's so correct, because he was like, instead of addressing me as a black man and you as a white man, I'm Morgan. Just know me as Morgan Freeman. That's all you need to know. And again, this is this aspect of what I was mentioning before. Humanity is in an identity crisis at the moment. But the thing is, through the means they're going in, they're shining more of a light on it, but through that means, they are placing more of their energy or attention onto that thing to keep it conflicted, which is this duality aspect that we need to rise above, right? So I completely agree with what Morgan Freeman's saying there, is that we're just merely feeding something for it to become more of a conflict.
I kind of think too, that because social media is a perfect example of that, right? Somebody can put something up and it's, if it's in any way controversial, it's going to get hits like you wouldn't believe and become really popular, maybe become viral, right? Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. Matter of fact, there's people who are doing it and they know what they're doing. They don't care. All they care is that attention that's given to it. I feel like
also that's an awareness of, and that's awareness where I feel like, I'm not going to say individually, I'm going to say as a collective, humanity is being driven an agenda to feed on conflict, and that's not good for us. It's just ain't. So, and I agree, like you look at all the things that blow up and become a phenomenon are things that are trying to create a triggering or conflictive response in the person that's watching it. But through that very step, that person loses their awareness, their self-awareness.
Yep.
And that's a bad thing for us. Yep. That's a bad thing of trying to get people more in a heart-centered pathway. And for me, that gives a clear indication of how strong a hold the mind currently has with this agenda of what's happening on humanity as a collective or a global creative force. Just to connect into what you were mentioning there.
Send inquiries, suggestions for new discussion topics, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com. If you found this content enjoyable or helpful, please comment, like, share, and download. Donations are appreciated and help us to produce more of similar content. Consider making a contribution at the links in the description box. Your support is greatly appreciated. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Happy Lion Center and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything. None of the content provided should be considered a substitute for legal, financial, medical, psychiatric advice or as care from a certified professional.